Hello there, I am Black Bright News and I wanted to talk about to filter or not to filter today. And what are we really talking about? So I have put down my views and I'd like to share them with you. There's been a lot of conversations online about filters, sometimes spoken aloud, sometimes implied, about whether people should use them, especially in my comments, and what they mean and what they supposedly say about authenticity. I think it's worth pausing, not to defend or justify anything, but to look a little more closely at what's actually going on beneath the surface. Because when you do that, it becomes clear that this isn't really about filters at all. It's about culture, it's about perception, and how different traditions read visual information very differently, often without realizing it. So cameras, for a start, are not neutral, especially phone cameras. They don't see people the way people see each other. They exaggerate, they contrast, they exaggerate contrast. They deepen shadows, they flatten warps, and they sharpen details in ways that can make a perfectly expressive, well-presented face appear harsher than it ever does in real life. That's not a personal issue, it's a technical one. In other contexts, we understand this instinctively. Television uses lighting, film uses color grading, photography uses lenses chosen specifically to flatter the human face. No one calls that dishonest. We recognize it as translation, taking something human and rendering it through a machine. Social media, though, sits in a strange middle ground. It presents itself as raw and real, while quietly relying on technology that distorts as much as it reveals. And that's where some of this tension begins. What complicates it further is that we don't all come to these platforms with the same visual traditions. In Britain especially, there's a long cultural history of valuing what might be called unvarnished realism. If you think of British television, that's it for you who don't understand that term, soaps, dramas, social realism, faces are often shown in an unforgiving light. Lines, texture, tiredness, ordinariness are not smoothed away. They're treated as signs of truth, of seriousness, of having lived. And what made me think of a soap is EastEnders. When you think about EastEnders, there's no polish there, there's no varnish, there's no filters. They are who they are. That aesthetic carries a moral undertone, whether we realise it or not. Somewhere along the line, a quiet association is formed that looking plain or even harshly lit is more honest, and that too much polish might mean something is being concealed. It's not usually conscious, and it's rarely malicious. It's simply something many of us have absorbed, but that tradition developed in a very particular context. Controlled storytelling, national audiences, and a time before everyone became their own broadcasters. Global platforms don't work like that. If you look at American media traditions, for example, polish has long been associated with professionalism and credibility. Lighting and makeup aren't seen as disguises. They're expected. And remember, I've spent 11 years living in America, so I know. Authority is presented as composed, prepared, and visually coherent. No one assumes that kindness in lighting undermines truthfulness. And now those two visual languages and many others besides exist side by side on the same screen, scrolling past one another at speed. So when someone reacts strongly to a filter, what they may actually be responding to isn't deception, but dissonance. A clash between inherited ideas about what honesty is supposed to look like and a platform that no longer belongs to any single culture. This is worth saying gently, without accusation. A camera highlighting every line on a face doesn't make a person more truthful. It simply shows what that particular lens and software choose to emphasize, and equally, softening what the camera exaggerates doesn't make someone less real. It just acknowledges the limits of the medium. Authenticity has never lived in pixels. It lives in consistency, in whether a voice stays steady over time, in whether what someone says today aligns with what they said last month, in whether there's coherence between words, value, and presence. There are meaningful conversations to be had about filters when they radically alter identity or create false expectations. Those conversations matter, but they're very different from quietly choosing visual tools that stop the technology from overshadowing the message. What's interesting is how rarely the actual content is questioned, the ideas, the insight, the lived experience. Instead, attention gets pulled to the surface, as though appearance has suddenly become a shortcut for judgment. But perhaps there is an opportunity not to call anyone out, but to invite a little self-reflection, to notice the assumptions we bring with us, to ask ourselves whether we're responding to what's being said or to an image filtered through our own cultural expectations. Global spaces require a slightly wider lens, one that allows for different traditions, different aesthetics, and different ways of showing up without turning them into moral tests. Choosing how you appear on a platform doesn't erase integrity. It doesn't dilute truth. It doesn't invalidate a voice. It simply recognizes that every medium shapes what it shows. And thoughtful people adapt without apology. So maybe the question isn't to filter or not to filter. Maybe the question is whether we can make room for nuance, for the idea that sincerity doesn't have to have a single look, and honesty isn't measured by harshness. For me, what matters is showing up focused on the conversation, not on the camera, on substance rather than surface, and that feels like a good place to leave it. So, I'm Black Bright News. I choose to show up here thoughtfully, comfortably, and centered on conversation rather than camera, and that's where I'll be leaving it. So I hope you all had a lovely entrance into the new year. I think this is my first video for the new year. But as I was looking at some of the comments, I was noticing a lot of comments about, oh, why is she using filters? Oh, she's fake. Oh, that's AI. She's not a real person. I'm real, all right. I'm definitely real. And like I said, sometimes if I was to use the camera as it is, it's definitely not complimentary, and it's not even what I look like. It kind of exaggerates and makes me look about 90, honestly. And personally, I wouldn't mind looking like 90 if I was 90, but I'm not. So I prefer to use a filter that represents me fairly. Some of them I use might look a bit dolly-ish and might look a bit too much. But I kind of get beyond that. I kind of find a place where I feel comfortable looking at myself, talking to myself and thinking, yeah, that'll do. Because really, what's really important is the message I'm sending. It's not what I look like, even though people can't really extract one from the other. A lot of people, they can't get past the way someone looks like to listen to the message. I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want anybody to be kind of turned off because of the way I look. But I can't please everyone. I can only please the Most High and myself, and hopefully some of you, or most of you. So you have a wonderful continuation into the new year. Safe, healthy, Try not to be judgmental, critical, and mostly be forgiving. And that's all I've got to say for now. Take care now. Bye-bye.